drive-in is closed.
We're with the Ace Tomato Company. Now what?
Why don't you gentlemen have a Pepsi?
Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan, and welcome back to another fun-filled, action-packed episode of Iowa's premier conservative podcast. Once again, we're joined here in studio with John Hendrickson and Chris Ingstead, and we have got a lot to cover today, or at least as much as we can cover in about 20 minutes. So, gentlemen, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so Chris has already kind of jumped the gun here. We're going to go straight to a construction update. So you peeked out the window here. So once again, what's going on in the courtyard? And the retaining walls have gotten a couple of blocks higher. We've had heavy equipment in here going for, the better part of months. But I mean, I don't know, by hand, I probably could have added a couple of blocks to each wall without the need for multiple skid loaders, but
right. I'm sure the mics will pick up the Bobcat, and it's backing up soon.
So Chris, I want you to tell everyone. So had someone come in last week when I wasn't here, looked like some sort of a supervisor type that gave instructions.
She took charge. Yeah.
So but what was that like? Because right now it still looks fairly aimless.
Yeah, it's still moving in fits and starts, but she stood on a corner of the walls, and with her hands, and John backed me up. You were here, you saw this. Showed the line of bricks kind of moving east west, and then she showed the line of bricks moving north south, and then she put one hand over the other, kind of stair stepping, indicating that she wanted more rows stacked up in both directions. And the guy nodded his head, and they started doing it. And I mean, that's what it took, was somebody just coming in and showing like, hey, we need to build this wall higher in both directions. And this is where we are.
So this was the pro tip that when laying brick, you need to stagger them.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes. And I think she was trying to show that she wanted both sides of the wall to be equal height.
Well, I mean, that's also that's craftsmanship right there. She
was also kicking some of the blocks into place yesterday, but again, I'm not. Yeah,
and just to try and paint a visual here, these are landscape blocks, retaining wall types of blocks that are being used to build walls, freestanding walls.
I mean, they're about 2 to 3 feet high.
Okay, I know this is really a lot of inside joke here, but we honestly have no idea what it is they're building out there.
No.
And this construction started last fall.
Yes. Yeah.
There is concrete floor foundation of something and some landscape walls of some kind and heavy equipment. And anyway,
I'm hoping this is done soon because I want you to bring your grill, because you were telling me about the temperature, and I think that's perfect for my amateurs.
I tried to grease fire in the grill because I didn't clean it, and it got a little warm.
Bring that one to the office. Yeah. We're not afraid.
Good. So anyway, what you heard at the outset there. So my part of this joke, John loves it, is I think what's actually going on here with this construction is this is a secret government installation because it makes no sense. And the amount of heavy equipment that's been in here for what looks like a grilling station is ridiculous. So you heard Spies Like Us, and when they come to the drive-in movie theater, and won't you gentlemen please have a Pepsi? And John, what happens when they go in and have a Pepsi in the abandoned drive-in movie theater?
They go to a secret lair. They fall through the floor.
Yes. Okay. So it really comes back. So okay. So here's a little surprise, and okay. So we've got the YouTube link to this scene from Spies Like Us, and I'm going to read you guys that. So this is YouTube's synopsis of the movie. Stellar comedians Dan Aykroyd, and then in parentheses, you give a couple of movies that he's been in, right? Mm-hmm. So the two movies that they say that stellar comedian Dan Aykroyd had been in are Sneakers and My Girl.
Neither one of them exactly.
Sneakers is a great movie, by the way, but really I wouldn't put it, like top two on my Dan Aykroyd movies, nor was he really all that funny
Right,
in it. It's
right,
just
right, right.
And
Was he a funeral director in My Girl?
I didn't ever see My Girl. Yeah.
We'll get research on that.
And Chevy Chase, his movies, Funny Farm, and National Lampoon Vacation series, which is great. We'll give him the Vacation series, but Funny Farm, like, okay. And then, it just doesn't make much sense. I will say I think they got it with John Landis. The two movies they gave for John Landis were Animal House and Trading Places. Can't argue with that. So anyway.
Research got back to us very quickly on this. Yes, Dan Aykroyd was a funeral director in My Girl. Not a lot of comedy.
Okay, great. This is the power of AI coming to the ITR Live podcast. This is maybe we can aspire to that. We'll just have it. Okay. All right. I forgot my gift. I had a present I was supposed to bring in. Ah, shoot. Well, I'll save that for the next episode.
Okay.
We all right.
Do we have anything else to talk about today then? Since we don't have
I guess we'll talk about property taxes then. All right. So as we record this on a Tuesday morning, the legislature today will move the agreed to language on their property tax bill. And I think I'm excited that they're getting a bill done. I think there's some very good things in there that will be helpful. And I think there's plenty of things that aren't in there that I'm glad aren't in there. And there's several things that I wish were in there that aren't. And maybe that's the nature of the legislative process. But we're going to try and take a stab at what's actually in this thing and what's not. So, John, you've probably actually spent the most amount of time with this amendment, which will soon be the bill. What do you think the highlights are of what got done here, or just thematically what's in here?
Yeah, it seems to be a combination of both the House and Senate, more of the Senate, I would say. So it first off starts with consolidating levies, which is something that we had supported. And
is in the ITR Foundation Property Tax Toolkit.
Yep. And then it also has a complicated, and I'm not sure if I'm going to describe this correctly because it's sort of a buy down.
This isn't the only opportunity you're going to get to talk about what's in this bill. So we'll paint with some broad brushstrokes here.
Their purpose here is, if I'm understanding it right, is to prevent increases from basically assessment windfalls, where under their formula it would buy down to make sure the levy rates stay within. Am I understanding that correctly?
But I think it's a similar spirit to what we have called the ratchet effect. But the idea, as you say, John, is to separate an automatic increase. Mm-hmm. You know, when assessments go jumping, or taxable values, right, go jumping up, that they don't get the free ride off of the rate that sort of stays the same. There's an interplay there that forces that down.
But is it fair to say this isn't really a true ratchet? I think buy down over time in chunks is probably a better way to phrase it. It's not a dollar for dollar.
No.
You know, assessment, taxable values go up, and levy comes down by rule.
And then they divide it into 3 tiers, I believe, depending on the growth level of those cities and counties. The other big part, I think, is a good step. Is they're taking one component of truth in taxation, which is direct notification, and that was actually in both bills, and that's moving forward, and I think that will help clarify, this complicated process and provide them more accountability for local governments. There's some other provisions of the homestead property tax credit, as well as for there's a provision for credit for veterans in there, and then there's a thing in there for transit affecting Des Moines, specifically dealing with DART. And
that might be the most exciting piece for Iowa taxpayers is that we got DART funding figured out. Okay, good.
And but I think the big one is the levy consolidation and direct notification. Those are the big pieces of this.
Krista, how does it frame up the bonding and November elections for bond approval?
It's November only bond elections. I think I gotta reread it. It's for the new bond referendum. It's not a revenue purpose statement like on SAVE and some of those things, but a new piece of bonding can only be on the ballot in November. And that's not general election. It could go on in the off year when you do city and school elections, which
I think it'd be fair to summarize all of, and there's a few other pieces too that we have talked about, but I think it's fair to summarize that they have brought a lot of good ideas and a lot of good concepts, some of which go very closely to what we have proposed. Some are just sort of share, again, kind of the end goal, and that is fine. There's a lot of improvements to the system that are taxpayer friendly. A lot of them center around transparency, letting citizens understand stuff better, those sorts of things. So good improvements. Probably in the future, maybe come back and really get to the root of what governments are able to spend. But what we're pleased about is not only some good improvements, but also that I think we avoided most of the traps that could have done collateral damage or presented unintended consequences.
Right.
I think we stayed away from most of those things. And that can be really dangerous, really enticing, because some things that are politically popular or might be the path of least resistance to get done are the very same things that come back to kind of bite you in a few years. And I think we stayed away from those types of reforms in this bill.
We were very clear that we did not support the use of the Taxpayer Relief Fund for a buy down of the school funding formula. It just that was not the right way to go with the Taxpayer Relief Fund, and that there were probably better ways to deliver property tax relief than that plan. So I'm glad that we moved on from that. I suspect that we will see that concept resurface in the future. But yes, I think this is, we tried to sum this up this morning in the pre-production meeting. And Chris, I think maybe you had the best kind of stab at it, but this bill, if it does one thing more than any other, will make it a little bit easier for Iowans to take some ownership and access the system and try and get results out of their local communities because of the transparency and some simplification of the system.
Yep.
And so I think that is going to be a huge win for Iowa taxpayers. There are some things that will lead to some tax savings by its function, whether there's some of the tax credits or the levy consolidations. Those are good things. But as we've said all along, getting folks involved in the process at a local level has to be number one here.
Yep.
So now, go down the road in future property tax bills, ideally there's more spending controls, which is something that we have really advocated for. But if this is step one, then great. And we're on board.
Yep.
So very good. John, anything else that is in the bill or anything that did not make it into the bill that we really wish we would have had?
Well, I think one is, I think you're absolutely correct. It is a huge victory that the Taxpayer Relief Fund is protected. And I think that's going to be a big debate moving forward. But I think
it's a ridiculous debate moving forward if they try to have it.
But they probably will. But the other thing is that I think it's a victory that the original House bill, the assessment limit, was defeated, and then the second version of basically their 3% and 8% parcel by parcel. Would have been I think had a lot of unintended consequences, and so I think those things being defeated were good. I think another good spot is that, and both of you kind of alluded to this, is that hopefully this is a stepping stone for better reforms. I think one thing, if from my perspective, I think what would be next is going to the heart of the issue, which is looking at whether you want to call it a spending limit or a budget limit, and that would be the best next step now, which I wish would be in this compromise, but it isn't. But I think that would be the next place to go, is to get at the root of the problem is that local government spending, and so hopefully maybe that will be something that will come in another session of having a local spending limit, budget limit applied.
I think that's right, John. There's one other thing here that is a win, and I'm not sure I can articulate this quite the way I'm thinking about it, but this year there were two big property tax bills. There were the assessment rollback fix, which at the time was kind of difficult to get done.
Pretty contentious.
Because, you had cities and counties really fighting back against that. And then this bill, which I'm sure that although cities and counties don't hate it as much as I wish they would. I wish it was a bill that they really couldn't stand, but whatever. But is that this legislature was able to still get good bills done in the face of opposition from these local governments. And I think that's important because it bodes well for future reform efforts. That it isn't that, well, hey, my mayor and my city council and the League of Cities and the ISAC, they're like, oh, they don't like this. They say it's gonna be awful. And so you can't get those reform things done. Well, now the legislature's shown that they can still do these things, and the world's not going to burn. And I suspect, now we haven't seen these bills pass yet when we're recording, but these are going to be bipartisan bills. I expect the majority of members in all four caucuses will. I could be wrong. I suspect they'll support this bill.
One thing I wanted to mention that you just reminded me of at the closing comments of the Ways and Means Committee yesterday. I don't know if you were both able to hear that, but I thought Senator Dawson had a good reply to, I can't remember which, it might have been Senator Hornbuck, who basically brought up the local control argument, and that these are,
he's been one of the few vocal opponents to these reforms.
Yes,
may have been.
And I thought, and I'm not quoting Senator Dawson correctly, but basically he said something that, this money doesn't belong to the local governments, it's the taxpayers.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really good way that he said it a lot better than what I just did. I'm just paraphrasing, but I thought it was a good way that he closed that committee meeting yesterday by reminding, who these dollars are not. They don't belong to the city, the county, the school district. They don't belong, it's the taxpayer dollars. And I think that gets forgotten.
I'm still waiting for the first time that local government or local control is used in defense of the taxpayer. You hear the charge of local control when it is about spending more money or further restricting the individual. So that's my response. But kudos to Senator Dawson for seeing that for what it is, that this is taxpayer money. And you pointed out too, Chris, another comment from Senator Dawson that was in one of the news articles, that making sure, and again, I'm probably paraphrasing it, but that the goal of a property tax cut bill in the legislature should be to make sure that it's lower cost to the property tax, to the property owner.
That's right.
And not something that gets scooped up by local governments, as we saw with the mental health levy.
Yeah, not just creating room for them to push something down and only fill it with more spending dollars from elsewhere.
Right. A property tax cut bill in the legislature shouldn't mean a property tax increase for the individual Iowan, right?
That's correct.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, and it's encouraging that they've started to see through that. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate that. John, thanks for some of the insight on the bill. We're going to have a lot more work to do organizationally to unpack this and start to look at how it will play out going forward. But
and I think something that's important to remember is even if we could recite the entire thing to you, forward and backward today, there's still it still remains to be seen exactly how it will be implemented and how it will play out. And oftentimes with complex legislation, with all the best of intent, in practice, maybe it doesn't quite hit the mark or so we will have to see how this plays out, and there may need to be tweaks going forward to make sure that, as it's implemented, actually matches its intent.
Sure. We could expect a perfect bill and then no one would never come at all. We'd never get a bill. A big complicated bill like this, you have to pass it, get it working, and then tweak and adjust and find out what really delivers value and improve things. And so, I mean, kudos to the legislature for passing a big package to get the ball rolling, to get started on what's going to actually work so that we can move forward.
And I think a number of them already acknowledged like this is a good first step. There'll
Yep.
be more to be done on this, and we're hopeful that that's the case. And frankly, we're hopeful about the other opportunities that sit in front of us next year, like coming back on income taxes.
Yeah, that's right. With the amount of space in the state budget, and given the comments of several of our leaders, we get to have another very meaningful conversation about income tax in the state of Iowa. I'm excited about that too. John?
Yeah, I am too. And I still say I think one of the better bills of this session was Senator Dawson's income tax bill.
Yep.
I think that's a good framework to build on.
I agree. All right. Well, gentlemen, thanks a lot. Thank you, listeners. Thanks for joining us. That's all we got for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends. And with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.